So one of the really interesting developments about this class is this whole customer development process. It says you start with your business model canvas hypotheses. And in fact, what you really do is you blow up the canvas and you actually post it to the wall. And you use yellow stickies, no pens or pencils allowed, because you are going to get most of them wrong. But you're going to make it visible, and you will actually begin to construct your hypotheses. And the next thing you'll do is look at them and go, hey, there aren't any facts in this room. Let's get out into the building and talk to customers and partners and vendors, and we'll learn how to do this with some rigor, with a process, not just randomly getting out, but actually design experiments, run tests, get data, and more importantly, get some insight. And the customer development process is kind of interesting. The customer development process is actually a 4-step process. The first step is customer discovery. This is where you construct your hypotheses and you get out of the building and start testing your assumption about whether other people have the same problem or need you think they have. And then you're going to do customer validation and actually see if your proposed solution actually matches what you think the customer problem was. And this test of between problem and solution and your features and customers is actually sometimes called product market fit. That's what you're out testing. And this is what we call the search for the business model. But now instead of randomly doing this by hiring and firing sales execs and trying to make numbers that really are just random guesses, we're actually going to have you get out as early as possible and test some of these primary assumptions. One of the interesting things on the bottom of this diagram that we'll talk about is something called the pivot. And the pivot is what will save your job. Once you find this repeatable and scalable business model, then you go into the execution phase of customer development. And that's about creating end-user demand and scale, called customer creation, and then building the organizations to actually build your company for scale by transitioning from customer development into a functional organization that's oriented for constant and rapid execution. The order is customer discovery, customer validation, customer creation, and company building. Now, one of the interesting things about customer development that makes startups very different from large companies is that customer development is done by the founders. Well, why the founders? It turns out that there's a couple of interesting things, and this is about human nature. There's no technology involved. In a traditional startup in the old days, you would hire a VP of sales who would go out because you were smart, this was your idea, and you'd say, go try to sell this, go talk to customers. I'll just hire somebody to do this. But remember, an employee doesn't have the vision. They're just executing what you told them. And guess what happens if they go out and talk to people who say, this is the worst idea we ever heard, or no, we won't buy it. What happens is they'll come back and tell you, and the first time they do this, you'll say, well, you're just not describing it right. And you send them back out for another couple of days or weeks or months, and they'll come back again. And if you're like any passionate founder, you'll go, I hired the wrong executive, you're fired. Now just imagine we run the exercise, this time not with a proxy, a head of sales or marketing, but we force you to get out, you the founder, to start talking to customers. And if you got that same exact feedback, it might take you 3 customers or 5 or 30, but eventually smoke will start coming out of your ears because cognitive dissonance is now coming into effect, is that you might realize that your story or vision isn't right. But unlike a proxy, a VP of sales or marketing, you have the power to change the company's strategy. You have the power to change the entire value proposition to say, well, what if we had these features? And customers might say, nah, still not. But then if you said, well, what if we had this? They might say, oh, if you could do that, you could have my check right now. Now, if you're a smart founder, you'd say, let me get right back to you. Because what you'll do is you'll go test that new feature with 5 or 10 other customers. And all of a sudden, you realize that you had the wrong feature set. And just by adding this small little change, you could now actually get a whole series of paying customers. Only founders could do that. And what we did in the past is we would wait to first customer ship, we'd wait till sales didn't match the revenue plan, and we'd actually make these changes by firing executives instead of actually having the founders engaged in day one. So it's the founder who could change the product, make pivots, and hear customer feedback firsthand. And that's the idea of getting the founder outside the building.